In this video, I'm going to rank all 8 sponsors in Spectre Divide on a tier list based on how effective and strong they are at the highest level of play. In order to do this, I got help from some of the top Spectre Divide players, who have all either been one of the top 20 highest ranked players in a past playtest, or have placed in first or second in one of the community tournaments hosted in the Spectre Discord server. I asked each of these players to send me a tier list of the sponsors alongside the reasoning for each of the placements, and then I combined all of those tier lists into one big pro-meta tier list. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started with the top of the S tier and the best sponsor in the game, Morrgen United. Morrgen is incredibly strong for a lot of reasons, so let's start with its smoke shift, which is arguably the best ability in the game. Smokes are always good to have, and Morrgen has the strongest smokes in the game. You can easily get 3 or 4 of them every round that can cover pretty much any angle. But the real insanity with the smokes is the ability to teleport your Spectre inside of them. This allows you to teleport across the map almost instantly, and there's no safe way for the enemy team to tell if a smoke is a smoke shift or just a normal smoke, which can put an insane amount of pressure on the enemy team. Morrgen's other 2 abilities are more reasonable. The molly is pretty small and doesn't deal that much damage, but it's still a very powerful tool for post plants and has some decent stopping power. And the trap is a reliable way to cover a lane on the map while also providing a powerful slow with a pretty big radius if the enemy team doesn't shoot it in time. Overall, Morrgen provides a ton of very powerful utility and is the only sponsor in the game that can really force the enemy team to play differently because of the smoke shift. Next up is Bloom Technologies, which is easily the most versatile and well-rounded sponsor in the game that can excel on any map. Bloom's Hex Barrier is a big part of that versatility. You can use it to safely peek angles to gather info, protect Zeus plants and diffuses, and give yourself an advantage in a fight by forcing the enemy to break it. Bloom's Heal is a very safe point-and-click ability that provides a powerful heal to your teammates and their Spectres, and you'll pretty much always be able to find a way to get value out of it every round. The Bloom smokes aren't quite as reliable as Morrgen smokes, but they are still very solid and have the added benefit of damaging enemies inside of them, so they can be used as somewhat ineffective mollies. The last sponsor in the S tier is Ryker Industries, the best recon sponsor in the game by a mile. Ryker's scan can provide a ton of information with just one use, especially if you take advantage of some unbreakable scan lineups or use your Spectre to cover a larger area with it, and you get multiple of those scans in a round. The hull mines are the weakest ability in the kit, but they are still great for gathering info or flushing people out of corners. The turret is the best flank watch ability in the game, as well as being great at holding angles for info on defense, and the slow effect it causes forces the enemy team to deal with it. The amount of information that Ryker can provide and the amount of lanes it can cover with its utility is truly absurd, and it works very well on every map in the game. A team comp with the 3 S tier sponsors is going to be very viable and strong on all the maps, so feel free to default to playing one of the S tier sponsors in your ranked games. With that, let's move on to the A tier, which is for sponsors that are still quite strong, but just not as insane as the S tier sponsors. Pinnacle International is a lone sponsor in the A tier, but it's honestly not that far behind the S tier sponsors. The grenade is a very consistent way of flushing out areas and preventing diffuses. It's a very solid piece of utility, but nothing crazy. It's worth noting that you can often get free kills with the grenade by tossing it in places where people like to put their Spectres. The stim boost allows Pinnacle to be the best entry sponsor in the game by providing a large advantage in gunfights, and the heal is something you can pretty much always get value out of. Last but not least, the flashbang is a very strong ability. It's pretty hard for enemies to dodge if you use it right, and it can blind people for quite a long time. Not only is it probably Pinnacle's best ability, it's also the best flash in the game by far, which makes Pinnacle stand out as a great pick for aggressive teams looking to quickly take space. Pinnacle doesn't provide quite enough raw utility to the team to reach the S tier in organized play, but it's definitely an S tier sponsor for playing ranked. Any team comp that includes 3 of the top 4 sponsors is going to be very strong on any map, so keep that in mind both for ranked and for coordinated play. After Pinnacle, there's a pretty large gap between the A tier and the B tier. The B tier sponsors are more niche or hard to use, but they can still excel in the right situation and they all provide something different from the other sponsors. Starting off at the top of the B tier is Umbra Reconnaissance. Out of all the sponsors, Umbra is one of the most difficult to use well, so it's a bit hard to rate it accurately. The Recon Wing provides some reliable information, although not as much as Ryker's scan, and the Glare Burst is a decent AoE blind that can help you fight some common angles and keeps enemies flashed for a very long time. The real strength of Umbra comes from the Heartbeat Scanner though. The scanner can hold an angle for 30 seconds straight and tell you if anyone enters a scan, which is already pretty strong on its own, but it also has the added benefit of making your scan in blind more powerful and easier to get value out of. Umbra isn't a bad sponsor, but it gets outshone in a lot of ways by Ryker and the sheer amount of passive information that Ryker can gather. Next up is Ghostlink Collective, a sponsor which is pretty strong in a vacuum but suffers due to the way the maps are designed. The wall is an alright ability that can block off multiple angles and stop enemies from pushing through it, but it doesn't go very far, it doesn't last very long, and you often have to put yourself in a vulnerable spot to place the wall in the first place. There also just aren't all that many spots where the wall works better than any other smokes, except for on Metro, which is easily Ghostlink's best map and the only map where Ghostlink is really worth playing. The dupe, on the other hand, is one of the strongest abilities in the game. There's no way to tell the dupe from a real player, and the instant reveal when you shoot a dupe is deadly when combined with the wall that you can get spammed through. On top of that, as long as you have one charge of the dupe, you will leave fake inactive bodies behind when you teleport your Spectre, which are also impossible to tell apart from the real thing and forces enemies to think twice about shooting any Spectre they see. The dead zone is just alright. It's pretty much impossible for enemies to push through it safely because of how much it obscures their vision, but it's pretty easy to just wait it out and sit behind it since the duration is pretty short. Overall, Ghostlink has some decent utility, but it pales in comparison to the guaranteed value and pressure of Morrgen and Ryker. The last sponsor in the B tier, and the second worst sponsor in the game, is Mew Robotics. Mew is a bit of a strange sponsor. It's certainly not weak on its own, but it doesn't really do anything that other sponsors don't do better. The Roomba can heal a lot of health in total, but it's pretty slow to deploy and awkward to use since you have to stay in the circle. Overall, Bloom's heal is just a lot more versatile and easy to use, although there is no penalty for healing yourself with patches, which is nice. The flash is pretty meh, it moves pretty slowly and can't go very far, and the actual blind effect is pretty weak compared to Pinnacle's and Umbra's flashes. It's pretty easy to see through the Mew flash at close range. It's not terrible when used as a pop flash to take longer ranged fights. It lasts for a decently long time, it doesn't blind you or your teammates, and it can't be turned, but even with all of that, it's still just not great. The Hyperdome is the best ability in the kit. It's the only ability that can create a fast recall zone, which is great for fast rotations and team play, and the Dome Shield is also very useful for the same reasons that Bloom's shield is so good. Overall, everything that Mew does can be done better by Bloom or Pinnacle, so there really isn't a good reason for a team to pick it unless they have some crazy strats cooked up to surprise the enemy team. The last thing we have to cover in this video is the C tier, which is home to one sponsor, Vector Dynamics. Do not be fooled by its placement though. Vector is a pretty decent sponsor that can find success in casual and ranked games, but in coordinated play, it gets completely outclassed by other sponsors. The Dual Amp is its best ability by far. It provides a pretty big advantage in gunfights and allows you to do a lot of sneaky and creative plays with teleporting your Spectre, although it takes some practice to really use it right. Vector's other two abilities, unfortunately, are some of the worst in the game. The wall is a decent tool for covering an angle or two while you push up, but there's nothing stopping the enemy team from just spraying into it and making it very difficult to play behind it. And in general, a normal smoke or even a Ghostlink wall is going to be more useful. The Nanosphere stands out as a pretty good tool for clearing out certain angles and gathering information, but it doesn't deal very much damage when it actually finds someone and it doesn't last for a super long time. It's an alright tool for both gathering information and dealing damage, but other abilities, namely Pinnacle Grenade and Ryker Scan, can do one of those two things a lot better. Overall, Vector isn't terrible, and I honestly could justify putting it at the bottom of B tier, but it just feels pretty impossible to find a place for it in a team comp at the highest level without giving up something valuable like flashes or scans. Here's the final meta tier list. Remember that this list is made for pro play, so it's not quite accurate for ranked, although all of the sponsors that are good in pro play are going to be good in ranked as well. While you're here, check out the unofficial Spectre Divide Esports Twitter account, which is linked in the description. Massive thank you to the players that made this video possible, and with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.